And when we hear the US saying that they're going to withdraw the troops from the scattered bases where they're in small groups, in small villages, small hamlets, and going to regroup in the population centers, the problem is, in Afghanistan, something like 70% of the population doesn't live in the population centers. This is not an urban society. There are cities, of course, but the vast majority of the population doesn't live in the cities. They live in tiny villages scattered throughout the country. And it's a huge country with a big population. Traditional counterinsurgency theory, they have numbers for this stuff. How many soldiers, how many counterinsurgency soldiers you need per 1,000 residents if you're going to win a counterinsurgency. And I forget how it works, you need so many for one or whatever, but the conclusion is, by that theory, you'd need about 660,000 US and NATO troops for classic counterinsurgency. That's what General McChrystal wants. Now, he's not asking for that yet, he's asking for only 40. We're supposed to be grateful, I suppose, that he only wants 40. But the alternative that we're hearing about from Senator Kerry and others, Senator Biden, I can't keep my senators straight any more than I can tell the difference between an admiral and a general. This is getting crazy. Senator Biden, who doesn't want a surge. All right, you guys get up here. Vice President Biden, who used to be a senator and used to be on the Foreign Relations Committee, right? Okay. That guy. Tall, white guy?
Yeah,
okay.
Got it.
That guy is pushing for there not to be a surge. That's a good thing. But what does he want instead? He wants to go back to traditional, not counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, where you don't have lots and lots of troops. You use drones instead. You use missiles instead. And, excuse me, but isn't that sort of what we've been doing for the last 8 years? Didn't work so well, I don't think. So there's a serious crisis here. In Washington, D.C. alone, how many of you live here in the district? Right. Well, as you know, we have no representation, but we pay taxes. We pay, as it turns out, $978.9 million in taxes to the war in Afghanistan since the war began. That's just Washington, D.C. Now, what's different now than during the beginning of the war in Iraq is that people get it. Partly because we're in the midst of the greatest economic crisis this country and the world has seen since the 1930s. And that means that people are feeling it in a much more profound and real way than was true during the years when the attention was on Iraq. The costs of war were enormous, but it was being waged on a credit card. So it wasn't going to be for 3 more generations before anybody started to feel it in their gut, to feel it when they had to pay their mortgage. Right now, people aren't able to pay the mortgage. And the question of where our millions and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars are going, that's becoming more urgent. So it's a moment when people are hearing things differently. People are hearing our messages, the messages of people in Afghanistan, differently, because it affects their own lives as well. So what are we up against? Right now, we're hearing from the White House that we need a good, strong strategy first before we make a decision on troops. Well, thank the Lord for that, because look at what we had in the first few weeks of the Obama administration. You had a decision suddenly, we're going to send 17,000 and then suddenly 21,000 new troops, and then we're going to figure out the strategy. Hello? Is that backwards or what? You send the troops and then you figure out what they're supposed to do there? This is nuts. So it's a good thing that there's a strategy discussion underway. Too late, too many ideas off the table, like a reduction in troops. I'm not sure if anybody has the idea of a freeze on drone attacks on the table. Should be. But it's good that there's a strategic discussion underway. But what are we facing? The Taliban right now has momentum. Al-Qaeda is not in Afghanistan. Most experts don't seem to think that certainly that it's not inevitable, and many think it's not even likely that if the Taliban came back, that Al-Qaeda would come back. So we're hearing slightly different arguments now in the US. We're hearing, well, we can't leave Afghanistan because we'll leave the Taliban there. The Taliban will return. It's not fair to the people of Afghanistan. Now, where did we hear this before? We heard in Iraq, maybe we shouldn't have gone in, but now we're there, we can't leave because, pick your poison. Saddam Hussein's people will come back. The Shia will take revenge on the Sunni. The Sunni extremists will carry out attacks, whatever it is. The problem is, all of that implies that somehow if our troops are there, it's going to be better. And what we're seeing is our troops are not doing the job of making people's lives better. You saw it in the film. You saw what people are facing. And I don't think that 40,000 more people with guns, mostly men, is going to help the women of Afghanistan. I don't think it's going to protect Afghans. If they're going to be taken out of their bases on the tiny towns and brought into big bases in the cities where the majority of Afghans aren't, I'm not sure how you can say that that's going to protect the people of Afghanistan. We are facing a quagmire, very much like Vietnam. And the question is President Obama facing the danger that LBJ faced in 1964 and 65, when the hopes for an anti-poverty program that would be real in this country, that would really address fundamental issues of poverty and wealth disparities, was destroyed because of the cost of the war. Is that going to happen to healthcare? Is that going to happen to Social Security and education reform? That it's not even going to be an option, because we're going to be spending all the money on the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, which continues to this day, still with 130,000 troops and 150,000 mercenaries that remain. No one in the Obama administration is talking about this crucial question that Medea addressed as well, about the role of the mercenaries. Is their intention to raise even higher the level of the percentage of mercenaries to troops so that they can eventually pull out all but, maybe a few thousand and say, look, almost all our troops are gone, and the 500 mercenaries that are there, that's a different story. We're not talking about that. They're not from the army. They're not the military. So why can't there be a military solution? We hear this a lot. There can't be a military solution. Right. So why are we sending more troops? Well, because we can't do development work without protection. We need the troops there to protect the civilian aid workers. Well, what a surprise, that's not working. The Pentagon said not too long ago they wanted to have a civilian surge alongside the military surge. They wanted 450 new civilian employees that would go and do humanitarian aid work, development consultant work, education, healthcare, all those things. Great plan. And they couldn't get people. And they said, that's the problem. Nobody's willing to go there. Nobody's brave enough to be like the military. We're the only ones brave enough. And we said, you know what? There are some people that are brave enough. And ironically enough, they're the ones that are succeeding. They're the ones that are working in projects that are led by Afghans. And that Afghans decide on the priorities. And that the training is done by Afghans for Afghans. The training of Afghan women by other Afghan women. Some of the small-scale church-based and other organizations-based that are running clinics where Afghan midwives train women in the villages who are not literate. Why do they choose the women who are not literate? Because if a literate woman gets additional training, she's more likely to move into the city where she can make more money for her family. They're looking for training women who don't have that chance, who will stay in the village and help provide health care so desperately for those desperately poor people in that village. And it's working. And because it's not a lot of internationals and they don't drive around in armored cars and convoys and make themselves targets, they don't need, they don't get, and they don't want military support and protection. They don't take sides. They treat villages where the Taliban is in control, they treat villages where the government is in control, and they treat the myriad of villages where no one is in control. Because that's an awful lot of people in Afghanistan today.